My wife Nan and I visited her brother's household over Thanksgiving, so I got to hold the newest baby in the family, my 6-month-old, great nephew, grandnephew, something like that. This kid is a big smiler and a huge eater. At one point, he guzzled his way through an entire bottle of formula in my arms without pausing once. And the thing of it is, there he was, the warm weight of him folded against me, the fat hands creased at the knuckles as his fingers pressed against the bottle, gulping and snuffling and gazing up into my eyes in complete dependence. I was in awe of what God had created, what had been placed in my care, even just temporarily. I felt that immensity that used to swell through my heart as I held my own children in that precious and delicate present. This is the kind of loving space, I thought, that should usher every infant into the world. And then my mind went to babies elsewhere, in places rattled by falling bombs or hollowed by hunger, or casually hostile to families fleeing violence. Ukrainian villages, Israeli kibbutzes, Gaza, Sudan, Myanmar, inner cities, reservations, camps, and cages along our own border. I thought about how fragile our youngest ones are, how incredibly tender, how vulnerable. The infant Jesus was vulnerable in just that way. Born not to a wealthy queen or a priest or even a merchant, but to a poor rural artisan and his teenage wife in a barn among animals, in a land occupied by the most powerful empire of the day, whose vicious lord, Herod, was already hunting the child so relentlessly that his family would soon become refugees in a foreign country. Seems to me that if God's activity in the Bible can be reduced to one singular project, it is to teach us how to love. Surely then, God's coming into the world as this particular child is no accident. You can't teach people to love through force, after all. You can't punish us into love. You can't regulate or legislate or threaten or beat or bomb us into love. Only vulnerability teaches love. Only tenderness and delight and need. How better to teach that truth than to arrive on earth in this frail, helpless, oppressed, hunted form? There's a way of thinking about Luke's gospel and Matthew's as well that says they really they anchor us in two core events: the birth of God as a human child and the execution and resurrection of God as a human adult. Everything in between teaches love, demonstrates love, communicates love. Those two moments embody love. And they are both moments of utter vulnerability. That's why the pacing of the narrative slows down in these two spots, lingers over the details, sears its images into our hearts. Here, God becomes what God teaches. Here, God calls forth what is most important, reminds us of our true purpose, urges us to respond. As many of you are aware, My family lost my mother a month and a half ago. While I've been through the vulnerable journey of life's beginning with my 3 children, this was the first time I'd kept vigil at the other end with a close loved one. That is another kind of vulnerability. Similar in some ways, but not at all the same. I felt helpless in a way that was, frankly, horrible. There was one night in particular when Mom was really restless and confused. She kept kicking her legs against the sheets, reaching her bruised hands toward me, asking me to help her pull her IV lines out or turn her over or lift her out of bed, none of which I could do. It's not a good idea, Mom, I had to keep saying. No, Mom. Mom, you need to stay in bed. My mom was a complicated person. Our relationship had its rough spots. It was not always easy. And partly because of this, I used to wonder what it would be like when this time came. Would I feel any ambivalence, any lingering hurt or anger, any regret? But I was lucky. A few days before her passing, I caught her in a lucid moment. I came into her hospital room in the ICU and knelt down beside her. "Hi, Mom," I said. She looked at me. She said, "I love you to pieces, Ian." I nodded. "I love you too," I said. And from that moment on, none of the rest of it mattered. Our differences, the arguments we'd had, the wounds inflicted and received, they all seemed so petty, not even worth wasting a thought on. It was profoundly clarifying. She lay there in the bed like a child, so diminished, so frail and small, so vulnerable. And the only thing left between us was love. It's so simple, really. Just love. Forget everything else. Love is all there is. As I said, I was lucky. I don't claim that this story applies to others or stands in for your relationships and your family. There are a lot of good reasons why a life's ending fails to sweep aside strife and cruelty and harm. All I'm saying is that in that moment, my mom was Jesus for me. As I had once been Jesus in the manger for her, needy and reliant, so was she Jesus on the cross for me, likewise vulnerable. I felt, beyond all doubt, her love for me. And I felt, clear as a California day, my love for her. I spoke that love plainly many times in those waning days, stroking the white silk of her hair and her soft cheeks. May the lesson of that moment never fade. May the lesson of this moment, which is the same lesson, also persist. This moment that we return to each December, just past the longest night of the year, as Jesus arrives, so easily broken, so deeply and inescapably trusting. The heavy egg of his head and his tiny limbs gather against our ribs. His wizened eyes squint up at us as lamplight pushes back the dark. The chilly air is sweetened with hay. A horse's foot clops in the next stall over. And there he nestles, the beginning and the end, the Alpha and the Omega, come to teach us love. Amen.